HCCI, or homogeneous charge compression ignition, is the holy grail of internal combustion. Why? Because gasoline is clean but inefficient, and diesel is efficient but dirty. In a gasoline engine, we inject all or most of the fuel during the intake stroke. The fuel vaporizes and mixes with the air to create a mixture that is as homogeneous as possible throughout the entirety of the cylinder. But herein lies a problem. The spark plug can only ignite air and fuel within a certain range of air and fuel ratios. At 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel, we burn all the air and all the fuel, leading to the lowest emissions possible. This ratio is called the stoichiometric ratio of gasoline. The problem with it is that 1 part fuel to just 14.7 parts of air is a lot of fuel. A diesel engine can do better. In a diesel engine, we do an intake stroke of only air. We inject no fuel during the intake stroke. We then do compression, and as the air gets compressed, it heats up. And here is the first efficiency advantage of the diesel. To compress the air sufficiently, a diesel engine must have a significantly higher compression ratio than a gasoline engine. The compression ratio is simply the ratio between the largest volume of the cylinder, when the piston is at bottom dead center, and the smallest volume of the cylinder, when the piston is at top dead center. The higher the compression ratio, the more efficient the engine, because the higher it is, the closer the piston will be to the heart of the combustion, and the more energy created by combustion will be transferred onto the piston and turned into work, rather than wasted as heat. A gasoline engine cannot employ such high compression ratios because they would lead to the auto-ignition of the air-fuel mixture before the spark plug had a chance to ignite it. This is called pre-ignition, and it quickly destroys the engine. So that's diesel's first efficiency advantage, a high compression ratio. Once we have compressed the air and made it very hot, and the piston is just before top dead center, we inject the fuel. As the fuel is injected straight into very hot air, it starts burning within milliseconds. And here is diesel's second efficiency advantage. Gasoline needs a homogeneous mixture to burn. The fuel must be mixed out evenly throughout the cylinder at nearly the same ratio in all parts of the cylinder. Diesel does not need a homogeneous mixture to burn. It burns a stratified mixture. In other words, we have a concentration of fuel in only one part of the cylinder, and the rest of the cylinder is only air. The overall fuel ratio that a diesel engine usually runs at is anywhere between 25 to 40 parts air to 1 part fuel. As you can see, we need less fuel to run a diesel. But this is also where diesel's greatest problem lies. Let's go back to the moment when we inject the fuel. The fuel starts burning almost instantly after being sprayed into the cylinder, which means that it does not have time to vaporize. If we zoom in on the fuel spray, we will see that we have localized areas of very high fuel concentration or rich areas, as well as areas which are near diesel's stoichiometric ratio of 14.5 to 1. And of course, we also have very lean areas. The stoichiometric areas burn the hottest because here all the air and all the fuel is burned. The higher our combustion temperature, the higher our nitrogen oxide emissions. In areas where we have very rich ratios, we have insufficient oxygen to burn all the fuel. And so the unburned carbon atoms in the fuel, they bond together under high temperature, creating solid carbon particles or soot. So with a diesel, we have increased thermal efficiency and reduced fuel consumption, but we also have higher NOx and high particulate matter emissions. Now, an HCCI engine, it combines the benefits of gasoline and diesel, but without any of the drawbacks. We use gasoline and we inject it during the intake stroke as before, and we create a homogeneous mixture in the cylinder as before. But now we don't use a 14.7:1 air-fuel ratio. Instead, the mixture is lean throughout the cylinder, with diesel-like air-fuel ratios of 30:1 or even leaner being possible. We then compress the air and fuel mixture to the point that it self-ignites. To achieve this, we use a very high compression ratio, similar to that of a diesel. Once the mixture self-ignites, all of it burns at once, creating a very strong pressure spike capable of producing more useful work than the propagating flame front that starts at the spark plug and travels through the cylinder of a conventional gasoline engine. Because we have a homogeneous mixture, we don't have local rich pockets, which means we don't get any soot. Because the mixture is lean everywhere in the cylinder, it means we don't have hot burning stoichiometric pockets anywhere, and this leads to lower combustion temperatures overall, which means no NOx emissions. And we have improved thermal efficiency and lower fuel consumption because we use high compression ratios and lean mixtures. So, all of the benefits, none of the drawbacks. What's the catch? The catch is control. Both gasoline and diesel engines have full control of when the combustion process starts. Gasoline engines control the spark plug, diesel engines control the injectors. But in an HCCI, we don't have direct control because we rely on the spontaneous auto-ignition of the air-fuel mixture. In other words, it ignites when it ignites. And that means that changing engine conditions are now a problem. Achieving reliable and consistent cold starts can be problematic. Changing engine loads as you drive is very problematic because we want more fuel inside the cylinder for high loads because we want to make more power. We want less fuel inside the cylinder for cruising because we want to save fuel. But different air-fuel ratios auto-ignite at very different times, leading to very unpredictable engine behavior. Ultimately, to have true control over an HCCI engine, we would need to know the exact number of air and fuel molecules inside the cylinder together with the exact cylinder pressures and temperatures throughout the cylinder, moment by moment, as the engine is running. Despite all of our technology, we are not yet able to have such accuracy of engine control. That's why Mazda said, hey, we've been thinking about this all wrong. We don't have to give up control to have an HCCI engine. Let's keep the control in the form of a spark plug. They called it SPCCI, and it stands for Spark Controlled Compression Ignition. Everything is nearly the same as HCCI except the spark plug. The engine uses gasoline. It has a 16.3:1 compression ratio, which is pretty much the same as modern diesels. It also runs at a very lean air-fuel mixture. The spark isn't used to ignite the entire cylinder. Instead, a very small amount of fuel is injected locally right at the spark plug near the end of the compression stroke. The spark ignites this miniature local fireball, and then this mini combustion raises the pressure and temperature of the entire already hot and compressed cylinder to the point that all the remaining air and fuel auto-ignite. When running on SPCCI, Mazda's engines are capable of 30% reduced fuel consumption compared to conventional gasoline engines. However, SPCCI is mostly limited to cruising and constant low and medium load scenarios, so stuff like highway driving. In other words, the engine is not capable of running in SPCCI all the time. High load and stop-and-go traffic, it will behave mostly like a conventional gasoline engine. Despite this, it is a crucial breakthrough. It is the world's first mass-produced engine capable of reliably achieving compression ignition. It is the first real step on the road to full HCCI. The commercial name for these engines is Skyactiv-X, and what I'm telling you is not news in any way. These engines have been on the market for 6 years. Mazda introduced them back in 2019. And I'll be honest with you, when Mazda first started talking about this technology, I kind of thought they're going to fail. Because gasoline of 16:1 compression ratio, compression ignition, a lot of very complicated advanced electronics to make the SPCCI work reliably. So I thought there's gonna be a big embarrassing recall somewhere down the road. Well, I was wrong. 6 years later, no big embarrassing recall. In fact, Skyactiv-X engines have proven themselves to be noticeably more reliable than the vast majority of downsized turbocharged engines used by other manufacturers. Despite this, 6 years later, none of the other manufacturers have tried or are trying to make their own version of this technology. Mazda has proven that it can be done. They have proven it can be made reliable. They have proven there are benefits. So why has nobody else done it? I'm sure that it's not the R&D capacity of other automotive manufacturers, because Mazda is actually one of the smaller manufacturers. They have a much smaller R&D budget compared to big names like Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, Stellantis, BMW, you name it. And I'm sure that all of these other big names have the capacity and the engineers to make SPCCI happen on their, in their own version. I'm sure that some of them would love to make a less reliable version too, but nobody has done it. I'm also sure it's not that the technology is prohibitively expensive, because as we can see, Mazda cars equipped with this engine, they have a reasonable price. Then it must be the upcoming EV revolution. Well, seems kind of slow for a revolution, doesn't it? Because combustion engines, they still make a very large, very slowly shrinking part of the market. And I'm sure there are many benefits to combining SPCCI engines with various levels of hybridization. So why hasn't anyone else even tried to do it? Likely the simplest and possibly most correct answer is that other manufacturers believe that the potential costs simply don't justify the potential gains. On the other hand, Mazda chose to leverage its engine design capabilities and engine design persistence. Let's not forget the persistence, because Mazda is the only manufacturer that didn't give up on the rotary engine before it made it work. So it makes sense that they're the first ones to also achieve compression ignition in a gasoline engine. Being a smaller manufacturer also makes it harder for Mazda to invest large amounts of money into EVs and hybridization technologies, so they probably just chose to stick to what they do best. But I think there's another very large and important part of the reason why other manufacturers chose not to do it. And it's because this engine is a hard sell to a spoiled customer base. Yes, I said it. Some time ago, I had the opportunity to drive a Mazda with one of these engines, and I felt immediately like I was on very familiar terrain. This engine is the last word of combustion technology, but it feels very old school. You actually have to rev it to make progress. There's no turbo torque at low RPM. If you want pace, you have to downshift. You have to actually work the engine. And the vast majority of car buyers nowadays either don't know or don't want to do that. Even the journalists are unimpressed, with many describing the naturally aspirated linear character of the engine as flat, boring, lacking punch, and so on and so forth. From the perspective of the average buyer, there's also nothing to brag about. A EV or a hybrid, it's new, it's different. There's something their neighbors can see and feel and hear. Spark-controlled compression ignition, what are you even talking about? From the perspective of the average buyer, this is just a 2-liter naturally aspirated, engine with 180 horsepower. It isn't even fast. And of course, other manufacturers, they are very aware of the perspective of the buyer because they spend a lot of money researching that. And they also know that the average buyer will feel like working the engine is a chore. You have an unimpressive test drive at the dealership. Ultimately, the fact that this very important technological breakthrough hasn't spread is very illustrative of the strong human tendency to always choose the quick fixes, the easier path. But the path of least resistance is actually a slippery slope. It goes sort of like this. I hate walking. Okay, here's a horse. Okay, now I hate having to constantly feed and take care of my horse. Okay, here's a car. Well, now I feel like I hate shifting gears in my car. Okay, here's an automatic transmission. Okay, I can sort of drive this, I guess, but you know what? Now I really hate using paper maps to navigate myself. Okay, here's some GPS. I thought about it. I actually hate driving. Okay, we're gonna try to make a self-driving car. No, wait. I really thought about it. I hate thinking. Okay, here's some artificial intelligence. The question becomes, where do we draw the line? Who gets to decide what's a skill and what's a chore? Obviously, Mazda doesn't, and apparently neither does the rest of the humanity, because who in their right mind would try to actively get rid of those traits that make them human in the first place? You know, things like problem solving and acquiring and perfecting different skills. As always, thanks a lot for watching. I'll be seeing you soon with more fun and useful stuff on the D4A channel.